Hello and welcome to another episode of the TC4RE Podcast. I'm super excited to bring you this episode today. We're focusing on Black History Month, as we are in Black History Month, of course. And we've got a great guest who's going to be able to share their insights and their experience of being in the workplace during Black History Month, some of their personal experiences, not just from being within the UK, but also from being within the US. And we're going to talk a little bit about allyship as well. But yeah, it's going to be so great. Really enjoyed recording this. Me and Jel had a great conversation with her. Really wanted to get her onto another one, and just really enjoy this because it's going to be a special one. So I'm going to say the normal line, which is wherever you are, grab a pen and a notepad, and please enjoy the TC4RE Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the TC4RE Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alex, and today I am joined by Jeramie Sutton. Hi, Jel. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm very, very good, actually. So because today we've got a special episode, which is going to be around Black History Month. So happy Black History Month to those who are listening to the episode around that time. To those who are not, and this may be a later date for you, I'm really, really happy that you've decided to spend the time to listen to this. And there's going to be bits in here that is not only just about Black History Month, but we're also going to go beyond that as well. Today I'm actually going to let Jeramie introduce our person who's going to be on the episode today, because she comes from Microsoft as well.
Yeah, so as you say, really exciting to have almost a special feature, I guess, around Black History Month. And, you know, I think we've discussed this before, haven't we, Alex? Like, we know it's a moment in time. For those who don't know, it lasts from the 1st of October to the 31st of October. I do know my days in a month. But I guess from a TC4RE perspective, one of the things we've spoken about is, like, do people know what it is? Like, it's this moment in time, it's a whole month, but what does that mean, and why do we have it to begin with, and, you know, where did it even come from? So I'm really looking forward to learning a little bit more today myself, and also hopefully giving some of our listeners a bit of an insight into how, what it is and what they can do, and if they want to put their colleagues or their friends or whatever it might be. And to help us do that is an amazing person, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment, but it's a privilege for me to have her on the podcast and us at TC4RE, because she's a colleague today, but she's actually a former colleague from VMware. And for those of us that are familiar with ERGs, with employee resource groups, she did it at VMware, and she was the one who introduced me to the world of ERGs. So I kind of feel like it's a bit full circle now of getting her to support us on something where we're collectively at a different company. And she's really passionate about this. So I think she's going to be a brilliant person for us to interview. So with that, Michaela, please tell us a bit about yourself and welcome to the podcast.
Sure. That, now you've given me really big boots to fill and you hype me up. So I hope I am not disappointing everybody. But happy Black History Month, everyone. I'm Michaela McCollin, and I am a Principal Customer Success Account Manager, or CSAM. That's a lot to say. Based in Liverpool and newly working for Microsoft. So I did work with Jel previously. The first thing most of you are thinking of is, here comes this American girl to tell us all about Black History Month and what does she know. So despite having an American accent, I was actually born in Liverpool. I was born in Toxteth. I was raised in Barbados, and I was raised in the US. And I've been back home in Liverpool for the last 10 years now. So please don't feel like an outsider is coming in to try and teach you something, because that's not the case. And I think that I'm super passionate and happy to be on here because, as Jel said, this is a topic that's really close to my heart. If I could do this full time, I would. And not just, DE&I as it relates to the Black community. I like to look at all intersections as it relates to women. Are we looking at accessibility? Are we considering our Asian colleagues, our Chinese colleagues? It's all of it are things I enjoy.
Yeah. And I mean, you say, like, I give you an intro with big boots to fill. I actually think for anyone listening, even when you just talk about your background, your experience, your insights, you do that quite well yourself. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But look, I mean, so shall we start then? I mean, obviously you've got a really eclectic background and upbringing, and you've seen, I guess, Black History Month all over the world, right? And how it kind of how it pans out. Let's start from the basics then, I guess. I mean, Black History Month, what does it mean to you?
So Black History Month, it means a lot to me. And I guess I need to give some background in terms of how I've come to be so passionate. So I come from a mixed heritage family in that my mother is half Nigerian, half English. My father's from Barbados. And then my cousins are, Latinx, Chinese, white, you name it. So within our family, we've always had a focus on the various cultures that comprise our family. Growing up in the U.S., I didn't realize how much of a privilege it was to have access to Black History Month, but also to see that history in textbooks and to be presented to me as a child in other forms. So, I came back to the UK with kind of that in my mind, and also having lived in countries like Barbados or in South Africa, where there isn't a Black History Month because every day is Black History and Future. Yeah. So come back to, the UK and get involved in all of these activities around Black history and Black History Month. And it's really uplifted me. But, we really need to look and think about how Black history started. In the UK, it's fairly early. It started in 1987. In the 80s, for those of you who are old enough to remember, there were a number of riots all around the country, and the Black voices started to be heard a little bit more. They started to become a bit more confident in articulating themselves and the challenges that they'd been seeing. So with all of that said, for me, Black History Month is my personal history month. And I know it feels like that for a lot of people who identify in the same way.
That's interesting, the way you just sort of coined it there when you said it's your personal history. What got you to that point? Because I think a lot of people, even looking at my background, I don't specifically go Black History Month is personal to me. I kind of make it a platform for different races that are under that term of being Black. How can you define it being personal? What is it that you do?
Sure. So one, it's personal for me because it explores all of, generally we're looking back, right? It's Black History Month rather than future. We're looking back at the significant contributions of Black people to the UK, to the world. We're also, we also during this time tend to go back. I always go back to the Toxteth riots, right? So there's the famous image in the Toxteth riots of police in riot gear, and they're in front of an estate. And I was in that estate with most of my family looking out at this riot. So we're in ground zero. So it feels very much personal to me. Now, to your point, yes, I do think that, Alex, it's also about bringing people along for parts of that journey, the parts that you're comfortable with and that you have an affinity towards, if that makes sense. Like bringing in allies and also trying to relate this to other parts of other people's history. If I look at, let's say, Southeast Asian, for example, in the Caribbean, there are lots of Southeast Asian, there are large Southeast Asian populations that have contributed significantly to the culture. And they've merged with, traditionally Black cultures. And all of that has come back to the UK and can be found in different meals. Like, if you get a roti from a Trinidadian place, that wasn't all Black culture because curry went to the West Indies via Southeast Asian indentured laborers.
And I mean, and that, by the way, like, how does it feel, like, having looked out your windows at those riots? Like, I'm hoping that in the time since, I'm not going to ask you my age, Michaela, don't worry. But
that's fine.
It feels like things have moved on somewhat, but I mean, does it?
In one regard, yes, right? So I think I was talking to a couple of people over the weekend where at least we're saying Black, where I think people have felt so uncomfortable to even say the word Black. I think the fact that we can use that word or descriptions of our colleagues as white or by their ethnicities and not feel like that's an insult. Or a bad word that we need to censor ourselves on. So we've moved the needle in terms of conversation. But I think the theme this year is around action for Black History Month. From an action perspective, I don't think we're there. If I look at communities like Talkstiff, where they are right now, pockets of Talkstiff are actually worse off than they were in the 80s from an economic perspective and career perspective.
Wow. And and I think it's so right what you say around how we even talk about racism and colour and labels. And we've spoken in previous podcasts, haven't we, Alex, about that fear? And a lot of it for our allies in particular, it's how do you remove the not knowing or the getting things wrong, that actually you're not going to be labelled X, right? And that's what we're trying to distill actually with things like this, so that curiosity and having the right intentions. And it's okay to say some of those things. I think you're right there that is moving forward, but clearly more action is needed. And it's great to hear some of your perspective there. I guess going back to what you were saying then about kind of when you lived in Barbados and kind of having all of those different mix of communities coming together. I mean, how do you, because a lot of people would have heard of Black History Month in the US, and so you lived in the US and clearly now you're living here. Like, how do you see some of the differences, I guess, between Black History Month in particular in the US versus in the UK?
Oh, there's massive differences, right? And also having to recognize that they're a few decades ahead in comparison to the UK. But at least we have Black History Month is the first thing to think about. But, in the US, there is a great deal of immersion in Black History Month. So, and it's, focusing on historical figures. So I learned about George Washington Carver. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he came up with 300 uses for the peanut. And that included shampoo, medication, all these different uses. So I learned about him. I learned about one of my other Black historical figures was Dr. Charles Drew, who actually came up with a lot of the technology around blood transfusions in the U.S. And then he ironically died because he was refused a blood transfusion in an all-white hospital in the U.S., knowing that was part of his technology. So you learn a lot about very significant figures that might not go outside of the U.S. But along with that, you're learning the intricacies of the Atlantic slave trade, which is, where all of that is is what Black History Month is resulting from. And they did not shy away from telling children things, about the atrocities of the Atlantic slave trade, about, hangings, lynchings, etc. And I do feel like there is some discomfort in the UK to talk about that. But if we boil it down, well, let's think about it. The British Empire is the reason that the Atlantic slave trade existed. It is the reason that Black people are in the Caribbean. It is the reason that Black people are in the US. And there needs to be conversation around that. Coming from Liverpool, I never heard from a lot of my English family about Liverpool's significance in the Atlantic slave trade and that triangle. But Liverpool was a significant part of the story of Black History Month. And I don't think a lot of people talk about how many slaves came through Liverpool and then continued the journey on across the Atlantic. So I think the difference, and I'm sorry, I hope I'm not waffling, but I think the difference really, it comes down to the level of immersion and the expected outcomes of the end of Black History Month in the U.S. compared to here.
Yeah, no, I really do agree with what you've been saying, because I think about what I've learned from being a small child up into my adult age now, and the amount that they give to you in schools or in businesses, and whether they're doing the Black History Month or not, because in most cases, a lot of them that I've been to haven't really had something set up, maybe like a day or something like that. And it's quite hard for me to go and say, I know about this amazing doctor, or I know about this amazing writer, and this is how he made his mark on history. And it seems like that's the big difference between the US and the UK. I'm thinking, what do you think we could do better, the UK, that is, in order to try and get those stories into individuals? And I guess more specifically, thinking about our listeners, how can they do that on a day-to-day basis, whether they're speaking to their child or to a peer or even to a senior leader.
Yeah. So I think, that's a really great observation. I know stories of Black Britain because I have Black British family in Liverpool who are obsessed with history. So these things were handed down to me and not necessarily shown to me in a book or on a platform. And I think a lot of these stories are out there, right? So I'm going to do a shameless Microsoft plug here and say, you've got Bing, where you can go and easily get resources that tell you about the Black experience within the UK and tie it back to other ethnic minorities in the country. Obviously, there's the Black History Month website, but there's another experience and platform right now that is not getting the press and the publicity that I think it should be getting, but it's called The World Reimagined. I don't know if you all have been around London or around other parts of the UK this summer and seen these globes with pictures on them. They don't always have pictures of people, but it is an immersive education experience that is available to everybody in the UK, both physically as well as online. And these globes represent the transatlantic slave experience. They represent Black British music and how it has evolved from African music and all of these things. And I think one is understand what the resources are, but two, we live in an age where information is seconds or less than seconds away from you. And if you're interested in understanding somebody's experience or Black History Month, just in general, make use of Bing, make use of some of the resources that we're talking about today on this call.
Yeah, and I do think the point around celebration is really important because that's what those resources can help us do as well, right? I don't think it's good enough personally for us just to be talking about slave trade and the role that the UK has had in that, because we also don't want the connotations around anybody from any ethnicity to always be the negatives, which actually, whilst we're talking more, why do we always want to put the downer on it, right? We want to be talking about the brilliant innovations and contributions that people have had as well. And what I do think we've seen a slight step change in it. It takes years, but my day job is to support the education sector. So I kind of work with governments around their strategies with tech, and that's across UK role. And if you look at some of the things that we're trying to do in Wales, things we're trying to do in Scotland, they're actively engaging now in these conversations around how they can change the curriculum, because fundamentally it's either going to be a pet project for a teacher or you embed it in the core learning, and that's when it goes to the masses. And that's some of the systemic mass change I personally think we need to see, so that it becomes baseline what we're learning alongside, any other kind of history or what it might be in the classroom, and alongside key figures. You talk about kind of the chap in America. I want to see Marcus Rashford in there. I want to see him in 10 years in some of that history books, talking about the contributions he made as a guy from a working class background in Manchester. These are relatable figures who are doing great things today. But that's kind of my rant on it, because it's such a passion for young people. They're moldable by what we put in front of them, right? So let's put the right things in front of them. But
Exactly. Exactly. But, like I was saying, in the US, I had textbooks that I could refer back to, right? So that was really simple. And obviously you go and engage with your parents, and your parents learn from you, and your parents pour into you. So I do think the curriculum, textbooks need to change. But I think, the point of Black History Month in the UK or even in the US is Black history is British history. It is not separate. It is intertwined. And it's not just Black history that's part of that journey. There's this discussion about, how the British Empire impacted India, how they impacted China, and all of these other regions. And those things seem to be sanitized and separated as if somehow the UK had no involvement in the impact. And I do think that we can also still look at some of this stuff positively, right? The ingenuity that had to come out of the slave trade or generations afterwards out of these ethnic minority communities is absolutely, amazing. The determination, the grit, these are all really positive stories that come out, post slave trade going into Windrush some 100 years later or so.
Yeah. So Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Michaela. And I guess talking about some of the positives, I guess, of the history, but also where we're at, things have moved on. But I think you make a good point that it's fairly embryonic in terms of Black history being a topic of conversation across the UK. But I feel like we are seeing a slight shift change in the acceptance of even having the conversation. When we look across TCare and all the member organisations, obviously we've made a commitment to improving racial equality in the tech sector, but we've all got different activities going on. We're all doing it cross-organisation, not just kind of with those that are invested in our ERGs. And I guess what are some of the great things that you're seeing out there in the, just I guess across the ether or at Microsoft that people can engage with and actually that can help them if they're hearing you going, actually, fair play, I want to know a bit more. Like, what's some of the great ideas you've seen?
Sure. So there's actually a group in the CSAM community or customer success community called IDEA, and that's around inclusion, diversity, equity, and action. Most importantly is action, and really bringing people in, sharing resources with them, but also trying to get people to engage off of their own backs and say, okay, well, I'm going to take this initiative. I'm not a member of the community, but I'm going to take this initiative, join, and I'm going to share some of my ideas. And then I'm going to take these ideas that we've discussed and start to cross-pollinate with other groups and with members of leadership. So really crowdsourcing, for lack of a better term, the ideas and some programs that you can put in place around IDEA. So that one really, I absolutely love that we're doing that. But out of that also comes mentorship and, some allies holding their hands up to support people in the company or in the community to give them advice, to help them advance their careers. So those are things that I'm seeing, at least in Microsoft, that really warm my heart.
You mentioned there about allies, and first and foremost, I think that's a great initiative as well. The fact that someone can put an idea and share that with the community and sort of make that idea into something that's even greater than what they might have originally thought. I think that's really good. I wanted to ask about allies and kind of move on to that area, because I want to know if there was an ally or someone who mentored you or someone who championed you in the past and really helped you be the person you are today with regards to not just work, but also all of the work that you're doing outside of it for Black History, not just Black History Month.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that you said for Black History, not just the month. So you're winning brownie points with me. But so my journey into tech wasn't a traditional one. It wasn't something I went to uni and decided to do. I just happened to be doing a temp job in the US, and somebody saw that my skill set, that I was super professional, and they thought that they could train me to do program management and testing. So I fell into the industry that way. And when I started working in my early 20s at Accenture, I was actually benefited from having several mentors, and this is really unusual, they were all senior Black women. And you don't usually see that in tech. So wow. I benefited early in my career from having them as my mentors. But when I moved back to the UK, it was like, okay, this is very different. Cultures are different, and work culture is also different. And for a while, I kind of struggled on my own, on just a little island, not really asking for help or knowing how to articulate how to navigate the different corporate culture in the UK and Europe. So I took it on my own back and did research. Then I started getting people who are interested in mentoring me and understanding, the wider community and how they can support. So I'd say one of my more positive interactions was with a manager from VMware who's based in Germany. And I loved that because he was the total opposite of me. He's a white man in Germany. English is not his first language, so he can give me some insight and perspectives. So that relationship from a mentorship perspective really opened my eyes in terms of maybe adjusting my communication style so that I can relate.
My mentor relationship. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So he, that was a powerful relationship for me. And I think that I've benefited from being able to engage with others. So that was one. And then I did have a bit of an allyship mentorship program with a senior leader. And for the most part, it was very positive. I was able to share stories, very specific stories and personal stories about myself and my family and the adversities that we'd faced and how that could potentially present in other Black and ethnic minorities within the workplace. And this person, who was also a white male, actually, I started seeing small adjustments that he was making and how he was engaging with people. So that was absolutely brilliant. But if we look at the word ally, right, that indicates somebody who is going to partner with you in shared success, right? And, sometimes when I think of allyship, I always think of it's a person who's going to bring you along, right? They're going to learn about your experience, learn about your community's experience, and help you to bring you along in a way. So I do look at it as a type of sponsorship, allyship. Yeah. Unfortunately, I ran into some challenges, and all of a sudden, this person is being non-communicative, and I'm not hearing from them anymore. And it made me kind of retract from engaging in some of those relationships because I felt that I'd been quite vulnerable. Yeah. And the positives, the net positives were really on his side rather than mine. So
yeah, and and thank you for sharing that. I think any story about allyship and mentorship is quite personal, right? Because you don't invest in these relationships lightly, as you just explained there. And we've spoken about allyship a lot, but I guess that's one of the things we haven't explored, which is what happens if you're an ally, but you're not a good ally, and what the impact that is. Because I think we could all talk between me, you and Alex, about positive allyship experience and how included, supported, heard it makes you feel. Yeah, we've never spoken about the opposite, when actually someone wants to be an ally, but do they? And are they committed to go in the process? And I think that's a really important thing to pick up on, because there might be people here who are thinking, I want to do more. But, are there levels to it, do we think, then, in terms of something for us to discuss? I don't have an answer to this, but, someone who passively wants to do more, someone who proactively wants to do more. So I'd say, to your experience, Michaela, if you're going to go as far as to say, I'll be a mentor and an ally, and I'm going to sit down and hear your personal experiences, I'm going to, with my impact and ability as a senior leader, do something about that. That is you have got to mean what you say there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, from that perspective, I do agree. And it's only probably just dawned on me while you were saying this, there are levels to this. Can't expect somebody who hasn't engaged in our community to then just go full throttle onto 100 and be the best, ally, sponsor, or even mentor in situations. And so there does need to be, an understanding. And an ally, it's sometimes a difficult position to be in, because you're coming in as essentially an outsider and you're looking for some knowledge, but you also don't want to say and do the wrong things. And so I have a lot of, I have a lot of time for people who sign up, who want to be allies, who indicate this. There's no real sign up sheet for allyship, right? It's just, you really on your initiative wanting to get involved in this. But it's a complex topic, and it can sometimes be viewed subjectively by the ally or by the person or people who are trying to help the ally.
Yeah, so no pressure to our allies then listening here, having a bit involved, right? That's what I
get involved.
But you know what? I always think if someone can get out of this, actually, that being an ally does require a commitment and investment of your time and your effort and your energy. I think that's a good thing, because you can't play at this, right? It's not a game. These are our lives and people's feelings, their progression, and yeah, I guess if I'd probably be thinking, bloody hell, if it's hard and I want to do something, this is both for you, Michaela, as well as Alex. What are we thinking those steps? Step one is, if this is your first foray into doing better and being better, what would you say those baby steps are?
I always, for me, I think education is the most important thing. That's got to be the first thing that you try and look at. Obviously before that, take the leap to say, this is what I want to do. But I think a lot of just people in general, and this isn't probably a conversation just about being black. It's about all the different hues of the world, right? We don't have that level of education to understand their culture or understand their history or understand why they speak a certain way, act a certain way, what's influenced them and things like that. So I think the key thing, if you're going to be an ally for a particular race or gender or whatever it may be, you need to really spend time understanding and learning. And sometimes that's not just spending time reading a book or going online and reading a bunch of articles and a bunch of stories and getting a huge amount of left-sided information and ignoring the right. You've got to speak to the people in those communities. And if people at your work are lucky enough to have you to speak to and say, you know what, this is this and this is that, and they're willing to be quite open, I think that's the first step in trying to help, because really listening is probably the most important part of being an ally. If you're a good listener and you're someone who can really understand what's being said to you and not judge it and not have any stereotypes attached to it, then you've really taken that first step. I mean, you're probably on the fifth step without you really knowing, but I'm keen, Michaela, to hear what your side of the story is. But I guess that would be the first step for me.
Yeah, I love that, Alex. And I love that you've included intersectionality, because intersectionality is, like, to me, that is the crux of DE&I. And
Michaela, sorry, for somebody who doesn't know, what is intersectionality?
Sure. So I'll start by describing myself. I'm a Black woman with disabilities. So I'm at the intersection of, Black race. Then there's also gender issues that come into play. And then, there's discussion around disability and inclusion from that perspective. So the theory around intersectionality is that you should be meeting someone sometimes on an individual basis, because people aren't just Black. I can't take off my skin and then just have you focus on the fact that I'm a woman, right? It all comes as part of one package. And when you're just talking about allyship, I think intersectionality is extremely important. And the reason for that is, I always say, right, I can't expect an ally to be an ally without me being an ally to somebody else or to another community, right? I am Black. I do come from a community that is underserved. I do come from a community that has, historically been treated inequitably, but I need to understand, what the LGBTQ plus experience is and how I can support them. There are some shared challenges, but there are also some unique ones. So I do think that it's more than a two-way street, right? It's like a magic roundabout where people getting on, coming off, getting on, coming off, but we're all sharing that same circle in the middle. So that part is really important to me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you, which I thought was a really important point to pick up on, because some of these terms are new to some people and, not new to others. But sorry, so back to your points then around kind of following up on Alex's points around step one, allyship. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I think it actually, to me, I think it starts with interest, right? An ally is just a genuine ally is not coming along to virtue signal, because they're going to be found out at some point, right? And it requires interest, it requires engagement. And by engagement, right, I also mean, are you going to come to my family's cookout? Are you going to eat some jollof rice and some fish cakes and all the other food that we're eating? Because I want you to come in and enjoy the whole experience and get an appreciation for that and listen to the music we're listening to. You don't have to like it, but just to understand physically and viscerally, I think that's the word, how it feels, right? Another part of that could be, are you going to come along with me to Talkstiff? Are you going to come to the Caribbean Community Center there and engage with some of the people in the neighborhood? One, you're helping just by being there in a volunteer capacity, but also you're seeing firsthand what some of the challenges are without me having to tell you what my personal history is.
And I think for a lot of allies or people who are sort of embarking on the journey, I think it's a big fear, right? To walk into that community and sometimes they might have this feeling that they're going to be judged when they are coming to a cookout, or maybe they're trying fufu and they're really not sure what to do. Do I use knife and fork or whatever it may be, because that's how they've been taught in their community. And just from personal experiences and the people around me, I can understand how difficult that is. So I'm wondering, do we...
At that point, going into those different communities, Alex, I mean, I'd say it's how a lot of black people have felt in their times, whether it's walking into a room at work and not knowing, walking through these different scenarios. Like I'd encourage allies to think, oh gosh, I do feel scared about that. Well, think about that being your everyday lived experience, right? And just take one day to be that ally that can, what's the word? Understand. I don't know why I forgot the word understand.
Maybe
that feeling is the point. Then yeah. Sorry, Alex, back to you. I just really wanted to point that out because that's a real lived experience for many people.
Yeah, it is. And just to add to that, change is uncomfortable. I think that's always a key thing, and that's just with everything. Any new skill that you're learning, or that you've picked up a guitar and you want to play this riff for your girlfriend or partner or whoever, like that's going to be hard, right? Because you've not done it before. So I think that's one of the key things. And the other aspect is time. They've got to understand that they might have to take time from doing something comfortable to them to go and do something that's not comfortable. I always think that's a bigger thing than anything else, right? We have such a busy life. I mean, before the call started, I was saying, look, there's so much going on right now. I feel like I'm rushing between meetings and stuff like that. But I've blocked everything out. I've got no noise. There's no emails. Everyone who works with me knows that this is my sole focus for right now. And I think allies also need to do that as well, because they don't realize that when they do that, and they are saying to a senior leader that, you know what, like for example, at SoftwareONE, we have a Harmony Day that we give to employees so that they can go out and work in their community. They go and say to the manager, I'm using my Harmony Day to go and do this, so I'm not going to be able to focus on what it is that you want me to do. Or even saying to peers that I'm doing my Harmony Day and it's focusing around Black culture, for example, and Black charities and Black communities. Once one person is seeing that being done and they're part of that community, it might all of a sudden spread, and then you've got this whole community who are all doing the same thing. So it really is that lead by example approach.
Absolutely. I'm saying absolutely a lot, but I love the conversation. And you touched on so many things there, but I think, one, awesome on having the Harmony Day, but I think having days like Harmony Days, or where you can go out and volunteer and doing it within these communities, right, is also sending a signal that this is being taken seriously and being treated with the same gravity that some other issues are, such as physical safety in the workplace, because a lot of this also ties back into mental health and well-being. You want people to feel psychologically safe in terms of the communities that you may be targeting for, and I've just now forgotten a word, Jill, but recruitment. Yeah, if you're targeting communities for recruitment, right? I'm not, I'm going to fiercely protect people in TalkStiff to make sure that potential employees or employers coming in understand this community, so that they're bringing people into a psychologically safe workplace with people who understand them and can relate to them.
Yeah, and all of that kind of that leadership, you can show up and have a conversation and make a statement, right, any day of the week, but actually I think it's your ongoing commitment, and it's the small things that show you actually are making a difference. And even having that on a Harmony Day, which I also think is amazing, Alex, shows that actually you can spend time to different causes wherever they might be is a great thing. But hearing different people say, oh, I'm doing this one for Black history, or oh, I'm doing this one around disability, it's that trickle effect, isn't it, of like slowly catch a monkey almost, of it goes on, everyone's talking about it, these are important causes. So it goes far beyond a statement around, we like diversity and inclusion, by seeing it happen over the course of 6 months, a year, and hopefully for forever. So I think that's really important that companies are doing that. And I'm really here to see SoftwareONE are, and we know that Microsoft are as well, Michaela.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm thinking that, the conversation around Black History Month and Black history, I think is really important. And hearing about what it's meant to you and your experiences everywhere has been, it's really interesting, right? Because you've got an eclectic background, but actually most people do, you know, and whichever way that might be. So I'm sure people have loved hearing about that. But I guess what final thoughts have you got around allies who are listening? And if this might be their first Black History Month they've ever engaged with, the first bit of content, and want to do a bit better, I guess what lasting message would you want to leave with them if they wanted to leave this podcast and either do something or just even research something, just to be that little bit better and learn a bit more?
Sure. I think, you know, to summarize a lot of the conversation we've had is it has to start with a genuine interest. The people you're engaging with will know if you're not interested. It's definitely not a tick box exercise. It is an immersive experience, and it requires you to also exercise empathy, knowing that you may build your empathy muscle by getting involved or being an ally, right? You know, you used the example before, Jel, where, you know, Alex was talking and saying, you know, people come into the cookout, like no one's going to stop playing the record when you walk in. You may feel uncomfortable, but the people around you want to embrace you. And to share one of my experiences briefly is my first day at VMware, I walked into the office and I was the only Black or mixed race person in the office. And I felt so scared. I felt like I wasn't safe. So you may experience some of that when you're starting on your allyship journey. Do not let that dissuade you. Continue and push forward. Be comfortable in being uncomfortable. And I stole that quote from one of my Microsoft colleagues. But be comfortable in your discomfort and recognize that there's an end game in place. So you may be talking to one or two people, but there's a strategic view on this, and this is for the betterment not just of Black people and mixed race people, but it's for all communities within Britain. If we understand more about each other, then we can move forward together.
Love it. I mean, so much that you've said there that we're like, oh my God, we'd love to pick up on that. That was incredible. I think it's a lovely place to be, right? Thinking about how we can move forward together, do that with empathy and care and sincerity. I would say that now feels like a perfect time to end the podcast, because otherwise we're going to be sitting here for another 3 hours thinking about loads of things that all of us enjoy, but that make 8 podcasts and not one. But you may very well be the first person that we invite back as our next guest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
There are so many things that we want to unpack there. I know that Alex and I would love to interrogate you just that little bit further. So, yeah, I apologise in advance, but sorry.
Oh,
sorry,
no.
I
would love to.
Just to add to that, I've sort of seen production in the background, just say a little message just to say the knowledge base that you have and what you brought to this episode is just is amazing. And to be honest, I was kind of like in my head, I was like, oh no, we have to finish now. Can we not have another 45? We can just vibe, But honestly, yeah, it's been an absolute treat. Treat for the air. I was happy to participate. Not so much.
You were both awesome, and I think the questions you were asking made a load of sense. I was nervous coming in, so I did have notes, and I'm like, I didn't even use the notes. I do know this stuff. Do I know this stuff?
Matter expert, Michaela. I wouldn't put that too much down to. We round you up and you just went. So that's all down to you. Thank you very much.
That works in good and bad ways. So yeah. But if you need anything, you can always just message me and let me know how I can help in any way.
Okay, brilliant. Well, yeah, thanks again for joining us, Jel. Fantastic as always. Production in the background. Thank you so much for facilitating and making sure that we have a good episode to share, and we really do. I'm very excited for when this one does come out. So to our listeners, thank you for listening. If it is during Black History Month that you are listening, happy Black History Month. If it's not, I'm really happy that you spent the time to listen to this episode. There's a lot of information that you'll be able to go and take away and use with your peers, within your business, day to day, and go and speak to your business about some of the things that they have set up as well. I know SoftwareONE has a Harmony Day and Microsoft have different vices as well. Go and find out what support you have. So if you do want to become an ally, or you want to do more for Black History Month, or you just want to learn more about the culture, take that step. That's probably the one suggestion that I give to you today. And of course, keep coming to listen to the podcast as well. So you can find us on all socials. Most of our content is coming through LinkedIn. We are now moving to Instagram very, very soon. So you'll be seeing more content from us, which is very, very exciting. You can also listen to us on YouTube, on Spotify, and on all the main media outlets. But until then, thank you for listening, and yeah, take care. Look forward to having you guys on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. So please continue the dialogue on socials. To stay updated on when we release the next episode, follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter at TC4RE. And don't forget to check our website at www.tcare.org for more information and content on today's topics.